Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. The death toll from Hurricane Dorian has risen to 20 and more fatalities are expected in the Bahamas. After beginning to weaken, the storm is a Category 3 again and is still forcing evacuations up the East Coast. It's expected to bring intense winds and flooding. CBS News correspondent Nicole Killian has more.
Rescue crews are still struggling to reach Dorian's victims in the hardest hit part of the Bahamas.
When we opened the door to the bathroom, there was nothing left. It was gone. The house was gone.
Those who rode out the Category 5 hurricane are just beginning to assess the devastation.
All the main buildings gone. They're gone. Everything is gone. Only concrete structure.
The Corneas lost their home.
Right now I feel torn apart.
Adrian Farrington lost his son in the surging floods.
I still can see my son getting dragged across the roof, reaching at me.
Here in the U.S., the National Hurricane Center is warning of life-threatening storm surge along hundreds of miles of the southeast coast.
While Florida has been largely spared, millions could still feel the brunt of Dorian from Georgia to southeastern Virginia. Forecasters say flooding is a major threat. An 8-foot storm surge could flood parts of Charleston, South Carolina. The governor ordered the state's entire coast, some 800,000 people, to evacuate.
If you are still in an evacuation zone, you still have time to get out, but time to get out is running out.
And Georgia's Tybee Island, about 20 miles east of Savannah, also faces the threat of storm surge, especially during high tide in the overnight hours. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Atlantic Beach, Florida.
Well, Hurricane Dorian has the USS Billings on the move to stay safe from that storm. This video posted on the U.S. Navy Facebook page over the weekend of the USS Billings and several other Navy ships moving out of Mayport, that's near Jacksonville, and heading to safer waters. After docking briefly in Hampton Roads, Virginia, we're told the USS Billings is now moving even farther north to the Naval Submarine Base, New London in Connecticut until that storm passes. All right, here in our area, it was the heat that was the big story today. Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire joining us now. Bob, it certainly was a hot one out there.
It was a hot one. We got records to talk about and some good news tonight. The red flag warning that was for all of central Montana has been dropped. The temperatures have cooled down. The winds have died down. And so no longer do we have a red flag warning across Montana. So that's good news. But take a look at our reported highs for the day. In Billings, 101 degrees. That's exactly right. Elsewhere, we had temperatures getting back up into the 90s. Places like Bozeman, look at that, 96 degrees. Remember that, 96 at Billings 101, because this next frame shows you what the records were for the day. Bozeman had, the old record was 94, so 96 eclipses that, so they got a new record high. Billings, 100 was the old record. We got the 101 today, and so we have a brand new record. And you'll notice places like Miles City and Sheridan all in the triple digits, but they didn't get that warm today. Just those were our old records, and they're still the records for now anyway. Anyway, we'll have the rest of your weekend forecast coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob. After showing significant growth this afternoon, the Fishhawk fire burning near Cody is forcing mandatory evacuation notices for cabins in the Kitty Creek Drainage and the Buffalo Bill Boy Scout Camp. Mandatory evacuation notice means that residents of cabins and residences in these areas need to leave that area immediately due to the encroaching Fishhawk fire. An informational staging area has been established for evacuees in the Cody Courthouse parking lot for questions relating to the evacuation. Cause of that fire is still unknown. And today, crews on the Crow Reservation battled 3 fires, but the largest was the roadside 484 fire caused by equipment 3 miles east of Pryor. That 524-acre fire spread quickly through a wheat stubble field and deep coulees. Some 13 engines and 2 BIA and DNRC helicopters, along with local rancher help, all worked to contain that fire this evening. And near Great Falls, we are learning more about the Labor Day fire that forced residents out of their homes and burned some 16,000 acres. A press release from the Cascade County Sheriff says 3 men are cooperating with an investigation in connection with the fire. The men admitted to using tannerite or explosive targets while out shooting in a field that day. Firefighters fought for over 6 hours to contain the fire. Officials say 1 unoccupied residence and 8 outbuildings were lost. In an unexpected turn, a man charged following the shooting death of a Helena doctor changes his plea in the middle of the trial. Greg Trude announced today he would plead guilty to negligent homicide in connection with the shooting death of Dr. Eugene Buzz Walton last year, who formerly worked as an athletic trainer for MSUB and also for Rocky. Trude made the announcement after a day and a half of testimony in his trial. Trude and Walton were returning from a hunting trip last October when Walton was trying to pull his rifle out of Trude's truck. Trude's rifle went off. This afternoon, Trude admitted he'd been negligent when he put his gun back in his truck with a live round loaded in the chamber. Trude's change of plea came after District Court Judge Mike McMahon denied his attorney's request to rule immediately in Trude's favor. Greg Jackson argued the state hadn't proven any specific standard of care that Trude failed to meet. But McMahon said there was enough evidence to move forward with the trial. Well, from kindergarten to college, first day of school is a special time. And today, students started at Rocky Mountain College and MSU Billings. Q2's David J. has more from both of those campuses. David?
Well, Russ, there's been a lot of activity and excitement this week at both Rocky and MSUB. Many have been learning about the schools and getting into their new routines. To help at MSUB, Speed Friending brought together some of the new students. Other activities have been done and are planned for students to get used to the campus. The last few years, about 4,400 students have started the year at the main campus and at City College. And over at Rocky, already some activity on the Rocky Mountain College campus. Montana's oldest college started its 141st year with more than 1,000 students. This year, students came to Billings from 31 states and 9 countries. The first day of school is special for students and for those working at the schools.
Every fall, you never get tired of it though. It brings in a new group of students and they're experiencing college for the first time. And so there's that same sense of anticipation, excitement, enthusiasm that they bring to the campus.
The most exciting part is just that start of the school year means all things are possible. There's all sorts of potential in the students, in the institution, in our sporting teams, in the research our students are doing, and it's an exciting time to launch all of that. And so I think it's that potential that sits out there ready to be tapped.
At MSUB and Rocky, we'll have more exact enrollment numbers in about 2 weeks. Russ?
All right, thank you, David. Well, a downtown Billings icon sitting for over a year with a construction barrier around it is ready to make a shiny new entrance into the downtown restaurant scene. Back in February, Q2 gave you the first look inside the beginning stages of the renovation of what is now called the Buffalo Block at the Rex. The restaurant was purchased by Billings businessman Rick Larson and his family. And as you can see, months ago, the place was gutted so a new vision could emerge. Well, tonight, we're giving you the update on how Larson's vision is coming to life. The Buffalo Block at the Rex is just about a month away from its grand opening. And as Q2's Andrea Lutz reports, well, much has changed. The historic vibe of the Rex still lives on.
Leading up to the old Rex, the same buffalo brick that greeted patrons for years. That's something that hasn't changed here.
All the woodwork is solid wood. It's all walnut.
But owner Rick Larson shows us what has.
I don't think there's a wire in here or a pipe or a piece of wood that's the same.
Construction has been taking place here for over a year, transforming the former Rex into the new Buffalo Block Steakhouse at the Rex.
It's quite a change to see.
On this day, Larson says a lot is moving forward.
Well, this is the first day of training.
With over 300 people vying for a job at the Buffalo Block, over 50 were hired, including a new general manager, an executive chef.
We interviewed 4 chefs as finalists, and he was the only one that didn't cook us a steak. He cooked a double bone-in pork chop that was it was just something else. So we have that on the menu now.
Meet Austin Stewart. He's the steward of the steak.
It'll be an exceptional kind of steakhouse experience.
Grilling steak over this.
We have a wood-fired grill. We'll burn blue oak over it. It's something you see in really, really high-end steakhouses, when you travel in big cities, Vegas, things like that.
And it's a shared vision with Rick from the very beginning when he purchased the old Rex. months ago.
And wine lovers are probably going to love the addition of these. They're wine lockers. That means you can rent one of these, store your wine in it, and then it can be ready for you on the table when you come for dinner.
Every time you turn around, everybody that we know seems to be asking the question, when are you going to open? I wished I could give them the exact date, but it's getting real close.
While so much here is brand new, there's still so much that still exists.
It's just renewing it, just getting it back to where it'll last another 100 years.
In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
And Rick Larson hopes to have the soft opening in the last week of September, and if all goes according to plan, he says the grand opening will be the first week of October. Well, yesterday, in the first segment of our three-part series on the status of modern communication service in rural Montana, Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison looked at access to high-speed internet. And tonight, he examined cell phone coverage and tells us, for starters, that the coverage maps aren't what they seem.
These are coverage maps from the big mobile phone companies showing what their networks supposedly cover in Montana. But they're not always accurate as far as what actually works in the hinterlands.
You know, the big carriers want to cover the corridors, the highways. They don't get off of the highways much. And that's where we're lacking is, you know, we have people that live several miles from a highway and they can't get cell service at all.
Triangle Communications in Havre is one of only 2 rural telecoms in Montana that still offers cell service. Most co-ops have abandoned cell service because it's expensive to maintain equipment and keep up with changing technology.
Every tower costs about $500,000. Then you've also got the fiber, because that tower doesn't work by magic, and that's anywhere from $11,000 to $30,000 a mile to put in.
So most Montana cell customers must rely on the big carriers like Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, or at the least use part of their network. These carriers install a tower where the traffic can pay for it, and that often means not enough towers in rural Montana. Paul Tuss is Executive Director of Bear Paw Development in Havre, which recruits businesses to the Highline and pushes for better telecom service in the area.
It doesn't matter what carrier you have, for the most part. There's simply not enough towers in our region to make sure that if you're traveling from Havre to Malta or from Malta to Glasgow or wherever, that you have adequate enough coverage to make sure that along the entire route that you're covered.
T-Mobile, which entered Montana in 2017, told MTN News it continues to build out its network in Montana, and that its just-approved merger with Sprint should enhance that effort. Federal funds are financing new fiber optic cable in Montana, which is needed to serve cell phone towers. But very little in federal funds is going to build out new cell service. It's also difficult to know the precise areas of need for cell coverage. Federal Communications Commission data say 98% of Montanans have access to adequate cell service, but anyone in the business knows those data, which come from the carriers, are not accurate.
Right here, they have this area saying we have cell service. And I can tell you right now, Mike, depending on how I hold my mouth, depends on whether this thing works or not. Now, they say we're not 5G everywhere in the country, which I think is a goal we ought to go to, but we can't forget about rural America. A lot of places in rural America, we got no G, and we've got to get that fixed.
Tester is co-sponsoring a bill to require better mapping by the FCC so money can be directed to the right places. Yet even with better maps, telecom providers, big and small, face tough choices on where to invest limited funds.
Building out these networks is expensive, right? And if you got to make some tough decisions about where you're making money, and unfortunately, because of the rural nature of Montana, a lot of consumers are left in alert.
So if we're going to wire up more of rural Montana for cell coverage or high-speed internet, who is going to pay for that? Tomorrow, we'll take a closer look at that discussion. In Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And tomorrow will be the final segment of Mike's series, and you can see all his reports on our website on the status of high-speed internet and cell service in rural Montana. Coming up on tonight's 10 o'clock news, while they are all unpleasant, it turns out some weeds are worse than others, and the USDA is on the lookout for one on the move in Montana. And in sports, which one of our reporters is swimming with a grizzly, and how does it turn out? Scott has a story you don't want to miss.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger, Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire, and sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.